And good evening, and welcome to the happenings in Medfield. As you may be aware, on a monthly basis, Medfield Television and myself sit with the Selectman and the press in important discussions relative to Medfield. The guest this evening is Selectman Mr. Peterson, editor of the Hometown Weekly, Josh Perry. The discussion will be mainly on a very important subject that has been discussed throughout Medfield for some time. You've guessed it, the state hospital. So without further ado, once again, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Selectman Mr. Peterson, editor of the Hometown Weekly, Josh Perry. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And so, Mr. Peterson, I'm going to start to turn this part of it over to you.
All right. We're under 3 weeks now from the special town meeting on March 4th. It'll be 7:30 in the high school gym, and on the decision as to whether or not the town should be buying the Medfield State Hospital property or not. I think this is probably a seminal moment for the town. I'm not sure that this, I was going to say that it's a generational sort of decision, but it's probably more than a once in a generation that you get to make this sort of a major decision in town. And there's an awful lot of material about the state hospital, and I hope that people will go to the State Hospital Advisory Committee has a website, which is MSH, Medfield State Hospital, mshvision.net, and a lot of the documents are going to be there, and so that a lot of the questions, I think, will be answered there, but there are still going to be a ton of issues and questions that people will have. For me, it comes down to a decision really about control. I like the idea that Medfield can control and make the decisions about what is going to happen at the state hospital. And for me, that's worth the town stretching a little and buying the property and then engaging in the planning process to figure out what should happen up there. We're a little bit over a barrel because of the timing. In that we're going to make a decision about whether to buy the property before we've made a thorough inquiry as to what we're going to do with it once we own it. And that is mandated by the fact that it is Governor Patrick's administration that is offering it to the town. And Governor Patrick leaves office in January of next year. So we have less than a year in which to effect the purchase while the Patrick administration is still in office. And we know that in the past, the prior administrations at DCAM had refused to sell it to the town. 10 or more years ago, when the DCAM started coming out to the town and presenting to the town this concept that they had of reusing the hospital property, they did a pro forma, and at the bottom of the pro forma was the amount of money that the developer they expected a developer would pay the state for the property, and it was $3 to $5 million. And the minute I saw that, I said, "Gee whiz, we'll pay you that." And at that time, they said, "No, you can't. We won't sell it to the town. The town is welcome to put in a proposal." Along with the other people that were going to respond to what they called an RFP, a request for proposals. And you would have had to have provided the housing and to deal with the historic structures and on all the other issues that they were balling into this ball of wax at that time. But the purchase was off the table at that time. New DCAM commissioner a couple of years ago, actually she started I think in March, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and the first thing that Commissioner Carol Cornelissen said was that she would like to revisit the whole process of the state hospital and that start afresh, do away with the prior plan that had been worked out between the town and the state, and one of the first things that she did was offer to sell it to the town, and so that The town then started up a process of looking into whether or not the town should buy it, and appointed the State Hospital Advisory Committee to look into it. That's a committee of, I think, 15 individuals who've been working very diligently, very hard for a couple of years now. And they're going to be taking a vote on their meeting on February 27 as to whether or not to recommend purchase of the property to the Board of Selectmen. I've already made up my mind that I think it makes sense for us to buy it. And as I say, the most overriding issue for me is to have the control. I want the residents of Medfield to make the decision as to what goes on there. And that's the way you get the control over what happens, is by buying it. And it's not to, and the problem is that, as I say, that because of the timing of this, we're going to have to buy it, and then we're going to have to figure out our use afterwards. And it's not to buy it and to bank it. It's not going to be bought and become a park. It's going to be bought and it's going to be developed. And I think that that's what the town will decide to do. It's the town's decision. But my guess is that that's what the town will do. And it'll be, in all likelihood, it'll be a mixed-use development with mainly housing, because that's really what people want in Medfield is housing. There may be a little bit of commercial, a little bit of retail, but the development will just be mainly in the area where the buildings are already, so that it's not going to change the look of it that much. The buildings that are there now are unfortunately so deteriorated that I'm guessing that we're going to discover that it'll be just totally unfeasible, uneconomic to reuse those buildings, and that we'll have to demolish almost all of them. There's in the discussions that have gone on, there's been pretty much universal agreement that we should try to save the Lee Chapel as because of it being such an iconic structure up there. And I'm hopeful that maybe 2 or 3 of the other buildings will also be able to be saved. The R building at the back of the property and the building right in front of it, which I think might be D3, but the 2 of those buildings were redone about 25 years ago. The state spent like $12 million to redo those, and so that and they took out the asbestos in them, and they were using those buildings right up until after the state hospital closed, because after the state hospital closed in 2003, they continued to use the office building in front of the R building as it was the State Department of Probation that was in there, and they were in there for a couple of years after the state hospital closed. So those were the 2 buildings that were most recently used up there, and I'm hoping that maybe there'll be maybe 1 or 2 other buildings in addition to those 3 that maybe we can salvage. You can salvage any of the buildings up there, but the question is at what price are you willing to pay to salvage them? And for me, it comes down to a question of it just is not economic to pay to restore those buildings if we're going to have to, as a result of that, have a much denser development there, if we're going to have actually be paying additional property taxes ourselves to support the savings of the buildings, because there's no question that to reuse those old buildings is going to be more expensive. And so that I draw a line and I say that I'm not willing to pay a lot of extra money to reuse and to save those old buildings. I started with the position that I really liked the way that they looked, and I'd love to save the campus. And as I've listened to the facts and the data and the arguments, I've come to believe that we just can't do it. That it's economically it doesn't make sense. So where are we now? We've actually negotiated a price with the state. Price is $3.1 million, and the campus was originally hundreds of acres. There are really only 134 acres that are involved in this deal at this moment. There's 90 acres where the buildings are, where the water tower is right now, and then that's 94 on that side of the Hospital Road. Then there's 40 acres on the Sledding Hill side of Hospital Road. So it's $3.1 million for those 134 acres, and the state is offering to let us pay that over 10 years with the interest wrapped in. So we would pay $310,000 a year for 10 years. It works out to $23,000, a little over $23,000 an acre. What you have to also factor in is that given the fact that you're buying the site with the buildings, that you're going to have an obligation to deal with the buildings. And to me, that's factoring in the cost of demolition of the buildings. DCAM, which is the state agency that administers the surplus state properties, and they're the ones that deal with all of these issues of demolition statewide, have given us the information that for them to demolish structures that are similar in age and type to the ones at the Medfield State Hospital costs them on average $11 to $14 per square foot. Now, there used to be, before they started tearing down some of the buildings, around 600,000 square feet of buildings up there, so that under those numbers, to demolish all the buildings up there at $11 to $14 a square foot, you're talking about $6 to $9 million or something of that range.
Is it possible to share that cost with developers that come in? Is that something that might be? Absolutely,
yeah. And that's the way that you would preferably do it. You wouldn't, the town wouldn't undertake any of this on its own.
Okay.
What the town would do is, if it buys it, it would then decide what sort of development it's going to do there, and then it would partner with a developer and it would actually just transfer the development rights to that developer.
I understand.
And then the developer pays only $6 a square foot to demolish the buildings, according to the figures from DCAM. So under that scenario, it would be like $3.5 million or something to demolish all the buildings.
I understand that, as you had said before we came on camera, that the citizens of Medfield, they'll be receiving a mailed of the map and all the information pertaining to the situation existing on the hill at the moment.
They're going to receive it's a summary. It's a 4-page summary that's going to get mailed out soon. It's gone to the printers now, and it will have a map. It's an attempt to sort of synthesize the most important data about the hospital. Because of it just being 4 pages, it doesn't have every data point in there, but it's got a lot of them, and it gives you a good summary and a good idea as to which parcels are in play, what's happening to the ones that aren't coming to the town. One of the nice things is under this deal is that the 2 big parcels to the left and the right side of the hospital, as you look at it from Hospital Road, would both be going to the Department of Conservation and Recreation to be preserved as open space. So those are the 2 big fields to either side of the hospital. One of the major things that people in town always say that they want is open space.
Yeah.
Space for passive recreation. And there is just tons of space up around the hospital. I live next to the hospital property, and I'm up there all the time because I use it I go running up there, I'll ride my bike up there. I was cross-country skiing the past several weekends up there. And none of those activities that I do are going to be interfered with at all by the development of housing at the state hospital site, because there are all these other areas around where the buildings are where you can still do the cross-country skiing or the horseback riding or the bike riding or whatever.
Well, I understand. We had a walking tour of people that have been up at the hospital grounds. I understand there have been over 100 that have gone up there. And you had gentlemen with a megaphone and so forth trying to explain as much as possible. And situations arise. I've had a couple of questions, those being that voting. That is one of the most important factors now than ever before. I've emphasized vote, vote, vote. But this situation now that's arising, it's mandatory that the people of Medfield get with it and vote. What's your dates again?
The special town meeting is on March 10, 7:30 at the high school gymnasium. The moderator is planning for overflow crowds, if required, in the cafeteria and in the auditorium, I believe. So he's anticipating that there will be a good turnout, and hopefully there is for the.
Well, that's very, very important.
And then if it passes, it has to pass by a 2/3 vote at the special town meeting, and if it passes there, then there will be a subsequent paper ballot as part of the regular town election, which is always the last Monday in March. And I don't know what that date is, but it's the last Monday.
I believe it's the 31st, but I'm
Is
not
it?
sure.
I think you're right.
And,
30th, maybe it's the 30th. I think it's no, it is the 30th. It is the 31st, yeah.
31st of March,
Yep.
that's, yeah. And that's when it's voting for Selectman and whoever it may
All
be.
the town offices and
town offices, and then this. The emphasis factor, Josh, knowing Hometown Weekly relative to coverage of this, what are your ideas on that?
Oh, well, we'll definitely, we'll certainly be there for the town meeting. We're certainly going to put out as much information as we can in the weeks leading up to it. We've got, I think, two issues that come out prior to the town meeting, so we'll certainly be emphasizing this because, as we were talking about off air, this is certainly the hot button issue right now in town. It's what a lot of people are talking about. It's probably the biggest issue in Medfield over the next 2 weeks, so it certainly will be highlighted in our paper, as I'm assuming it probably will be in the press as well. Just in conversations that you've had with people in town, what is the sense that you're getting from residents about how they feel?
It's interesting because I haven't talked to that many people about it, other than the people that I've been involved with at the meetings, because I go to all the State Hospital Advisory Committee meetings, and so that, I hear the discussion there. But outside of the people that I see at the townhouse, there hasn't been a lot of people asking about it yet.
Yeah, I've similar situation. The people I've talked to, everybody sort of references it, but nobody's really. I'm not sure if people have made up their minds at this point. So it'll be interesting to see on March 10th how it all plays out.
Well, I think when people get this mailing from the town about this,
important.
that'll certainly galvanize their attention to the issue, and hopefully this will give them enough information that they can figure out how they want to proceed on it.
When do you contemplate, now you said it was in press, when do you contemplate mailing these out?
I don't know. I'm not involved in that. I know it went to the printer within the past week, and so I would hope that it just as soon as possible. But I don't know the details of that.
Well, that's very important because of the fact that I've had people ask me, and I had one lady tell me most definitely they're going to vote on it, and she's all for it. Well, that was just one, but I don't know, a multitude of people that that you talk to, and you're quite right, Joss, when you made the statement that some are undecided. Shall we go on, Peter?
The mailing is available. I put it up on my blog, so anybody that wants to get it right away and doesn't want to have to wait for the mailing, they can go to Medfield 02052, and it's there. That's at my blog at WordPress. But if you just Google Medfield with the zip code, I think you'll find it, or Google me, and it'll get you there, I think.
Is it also on the visioning website? Is it on the?
I don't know if they've put it up there or not, to be honest, but I bet you they have.
Or will soon.
Or will, yeah, if they haven't already.
I think that will sort of spark more interest as people realize that it's getting a little bit closer. I think sometimes even something 2 weeks away seems like it's so far for people that they don't really, and it hasn't really become the biggest issue. I mean, at this point, I think people, as we were joking about off air, I think the snow has been something that's sort of taken people's attention quite a bit. But I certainly think that it's a vital issue for the people in Medfield, because I think, as you've talked about, I think it's something that could define the town going forward for years.
And what people will find is that there's not only this 4-page handout that the State Hospital Advisory Committee has done, but the State Hospital Advisory Committee ran a visioning session in January that I found just fascinating to go to. It was attended by a little over 100 people, and what they did...
That was on Saturday, I believe, up there at the center.
At the center, yep. And what we did at that was we got lectured to, so we got a little bit of information given to us, and then we broke out into maybe 10 or 12 tables of people, so that 10 and fewer in a group, and then each table discussed a series of issues and then reported back to the larger group. And we did that 2 times, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And the consultant who was hired to run that session for the town, that visioning session they called it, put together a consensus map of the state hospital property. I brought mine along. I don't have a color printer, and so I just kind of started to color it in a little bit to help Jack and Josh figure it out. But they're basically different sections that they've indicated are, in their estimation, were the consensus of people as to what should happen at that state hospital site. And this isn't the ultimate plan, but it's just the results of that visioning session with 100 residents who got together and spent 9 to 3, I think it was 6 hours that we were there, talking about it. And there's one section for single-family homes. There's one section that's for neighborhood retail, business, medical offices, etc. The area around the Lee Chapel, everybody felt should be kept as a community green. There's another area that's devoted to redevelop historic core for apartments and townhouses with both market rate and affordable units, safe key buildings. Another one says senior housing, assisted living. I think that there seems to be a lot of agreement that there's a lot of housing types that we're missing in Medfield, that we have a lot of single-family homes, but we have fewer apartments, we have fewer condominiums, we have very few attached housing, and we don't really have much housing that appeals to the empty nesters. We lose a lot of Medfield people that go over to River's Edge and the other development in Norfolk. And it would be nice to have those people have an opportunity to move to a development of appropriate housing at the state hospital that would appeal to them. But that's, as I say, that's the discussion that'll come after the town meeting as to what the town actually wants to see developed there and done there. So that would be stage 2. Stage 1 is to decide whether to buy it or not.
Jack, one of the things you mentioned, what you asked about was, in terms of our coverage of this issue as well. And one of the things that we've had in the paper the last couple of weeks is Richard DeSorger, another one of the selectmen. He writes his weekly This Old Town column that goes in the paper, and he's been discussing the history behind the state hospital for the last few weeks. And I think that's important for residents to remember too, is that this is, in many respects, a historic moment for the town in terms of the state hospital. I mean, this is something that has been under state control for more than 100 years. I mean, this is something that, this is a rare opportunity for the town to be able to take control, and for the residents to, have a say in what goes on in that property. And I know you alluded to it earlier. And I think that's something that, in terms of what we've been doing as well, in covering it, the visioning workshop was something also that we had in the paper. But I think in terms of the history of this, that's something that's very important for people to remember, that this isn't something that this is something that's been worked to for a number of years, and that
to my knowledge, it began in 1896.
The hospital. Yep.
The hospital,
Yep. The reuse, the discussions between the state and the town began around 2001 or 2002, because I know that it began shortly after I became a selectman. I think the first year that I was a selectman, I spent studying why we needed to build 3 new schools. And then I think after that we started, so maybe around 2002, it started with the state hospital discussions.
Well, I do want to commend you, Mr. Peterson. You've done an awful lot of work relative to state hospital and the situation existing. And consequently, the better that people are aware of what's going on, the better off they're going to be.
Oh, absolutely.
And then vote. That's the most important thing.
It's important that people have the information and know what the issues are, know what the details are, and so that they can make an informed and educated judgment.
Well, what you have put together here, which, as you said, will be mailing out.
I didn't put that together. That wasn't me.
No, I know what that. So is other areas you have a list you want to add?
I was making notes of the things that I wanted to talk to the people in town about, and the first one was the control. The second one was the timing, and that has to do with the Patrick administration disappearing. The third one was seeing that the town gets what we want and not what the state wants to have happen. I'd much rather see the residents of Medfield make the decision than the state make the decision about what gets done at the state hospital. The next issue for me was the price. I think it's very attractive. The $23,000 per acre, the payment over 10 years, the demolition costs I think are manageable. There's also the state has developed what they call a partnership model for this sort of disposition. We're the second town in the state to use this. The first one was Westboro, and Westboro is only a matter of months ahead of us. They've already voted at their town meeting to buy the former Westboro State Hospital. I think they're paying $2 million for 90 acres. And part of the state's partnership model is that as we reuse or redevelop the property, that we share in the profits with them. So they basically still have a finger in, so that if we resell it and make money on the resale, they get half of the profit.
Oh, I see.
But we get the other half, and our half can go up as high as 70% if we meet certain benchmarks. Benchmarks are in terms of planning, doing a study. I think you get 2.5% more for doing that. If you do it in a quick enough way, you get another 5% for that. There are all these different percentages that add up to another total of 20%, so that we can get up to 70% of the profits if we redevelop the state hospital.
Does it, in terms of how it's redeveloped, is that
they don't care?
They don't care. Okay.
They don't care. That's the other thing that we're getting total control. And there are no limits on it at all. There's some limits on the use of the 40-acre sledding hill area. Those are agricultural soils, and the state has a policy against elimination of agricultural soils. The agreement on that side of the street is that we're only able to build on 12 acres of that, and only one building, I believe, is the way that it goes. And the other 28 acres has to just remain as passive recreation. So, I think that a lot of the discussion has been around the environmental hazards at the site, and that is an area that I think that we can feel pretty confident about, because the environmental issues have really been solved at this point. There's been this long mediation process over the cleanup, and most of the cleanup that is related to that mediation process is not even within the parameters of what the town would be buying. That's mainly land now that's down in the river and right along the river where the former power plant was going to be, or was, and all that land is going to the Department of Conservation and Recreation to be maintained as parkland. The hazards that we're buying basically are asbestos and lead paint, and the cost of abating those, according to DCAM, is in these figures that they've given us of $11 to $14 a square foot if we do it. So that's upwards of $9 to $10 million if the town does it, or $6 a square foot if you have a private party do it.
So that includes the environment. That includes
dealing with the asbestos and with the lead paint, which are the two big environmental hazard issues that remain inside the buildings. Not only is the site pretty much clean, but we have the benefit of, once the state finishes the cleanup down around the river, they're basically going to create a little park there. They've hired or they're using a landscape architect from the Garden Continuum. Monique Allen, I think, is her name. And I've seen the models. I think you probably saw that too at the.
Yes, I saw that.
And it looks like it'll be just a very handsome area. They're going to build an overlook at the bend in the river, and you'll have a nice view up towards King Philip Lookout in Sherburne. The cost to own it going forward per year, I think, is going to be very manageable. DCAM claims that they've been spending a little bit over $300,000 a year to maintain it, mainly for the 24/7 security that they have. I don't see that the town would need to do 24/7 security. It's not certainly my decision, but my opinion is that if I were in charge of the security up there, what I would do is I would just limit access to vehicles, and I would do that with a very simple guardrail type of structure across the hospital roadside. The police chief said the other night that he was thinking that they could have a gate that's automatically opened by the, I guess all the public safety vehicles have some sort of button.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned that they have one on Eric Road like that, where they can just they can open it from their cruisers, and that he would see the same sort of thing. So, and I would be inclined to put in cameras and have them monitored down at the police station. And so that would be my solution. And you pay a little bit to the DPW might have to go up and put up some pieces of plywood every once in a while, but I don't think it would be much of an expense for the town to deal with it on an ongoing basis until we did the development. Mm-hmm. And so that would be the next stage. If the town opts to buy it, then we would begin this planning process to get to what it is that the town wants for development there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gentlemen, I see that old clock on the wall as usual. And I usually ask before we close the program what you'd like to add before we close. Mr. Peterson, what would you like to add relative to what we've gone over in the last half hour?
I would just summarize that it's an opportunity for the town. It's an opportunity that I think it's, as I say, it's more than a generational opportunity. It's maybe a once in 100 years opportunity for the town. For short money, you gain total control. You get to do what you want, and you actually have an opportunity to make some money out of it, if depending on what the development is. I'm not holding my breath for making money out of it, but if we can get what we want for short money, I think that's the main thing.
Josh?
Well, from an outsider's perspective, I suppose, not being a Medfield resident, but I do agree with Mr. Peterson. I believe that it's it's an opportunity for the town and for Medfield residents to have a say on this property that for so long has been under the control of the state, and I think it's a rare opportunity and I think an exciting one for the town.
I think it's the prettiest spot in Medfield.
Mm.
And my thoughts are the most important factor, and I've used this so many, many times: vote. And this is critical, very critical to the people of Medfield. As Mr. Peterson has said, and others, get to that town meeting. Vote is so very, very important, because this is your town. Take advantage of your town and the state hospital. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us
Mr.
over.
Peterson and Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
This is Jeff Peterson wishing you and yours the very best. Good night.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.